Hey guys, today we're going to talk about the 2025 wide-body paddle releases so far. Now, originally this video was going to be a lot longer with a lot more numbers and comparisons to older paddles, but that video kept getting delayed and then newer paddles kept coming out. So the script kept getting longer and longer and the video kept getting dragged out and I had no idea when I was going to be able to release it. So for the sake of time, just so I can get this video out of the way, I decided to throw out the old script and instead we're just going to freestyle over my thoughts on these 2025 wide body releases that have come out so far this year. So let's get into it. All right, first off, let's talk about the infamous Ronbus Ripple R2 version 2. Now I've hit the many iterations of this paddle from the alpha to the beta production, the one that got banned, and then now we finally have the production version that we're allowed to use in tournaments. So what's different from this and the previous versions is that those are a lot lighter, but also those provided more pop. And those had a bit more like effortless power, like you didn't need to swing as hard to generate power versus this right here is the heaviest paddle on this list. It has the highest swing weight, and which is really surprising because this is a 14mm wide body, and the swing weight it has is competing against like hybrid paddles that are 16mm. So this one right here, while it still is very powerful because it's heavy and when you go for a full swing with this, it does generate a lot of power. It doesn't have the pop and effortless power of the previous models of it. Um, Now, the one other change from that is that the feel is a lot more dense. So you have a less of that hollow feel, but in exchange, you get more control with this version. So it's just a different paddle overall, and it's a bit hard to recommend this because of how heavy it is, but it is really stable. It does have a pretty good sweet spot and does have good control because it can hold on the ball longer now. Um, but if you are looking for something that was like the original Ripples, this is a completely different paddle. Yeah, if you like a heavier wide body, then I would recommend this. But otherwise, yeah, it's not what you're gonna look for if you wanted the original, like, beta version of the Ripples. Alright, moving on, let's take a look at the Joola Pro 4 Scorpeus 14mm. So, this is the paddle I would actually recommend if you wanted a bit more effortless power. So, if you wanted something lighter with a bit more pop, then I would recommend this over the Ripple V2. Um, it's not gonna have as much power overall because uh, that Rebel V2 is still heavier, and that one's just going to just generate more power on the drives, even if you do weight up the Scorpius. But I think the Scorpius is going to be appealing to more people just because of that lighter swing weight and people that want that power without having to swing as hard. You're going to get that from the Scorpius. But in terms of like how like people would ask them to describe this, it's what you would expect from a Scorpius, especially like if you're familiar with the Gen 3 Scorpius 14mm. It's just going to be a bit more dense and plush feeling because the extra foam inserts. And compared to something like a Pro 4 Perseus or Agassi, it's a really similar feel just in a wide body. So not much to say about this, but it is a paddle I would still recommend if you're looking for a powerful wide body on the market that does have fast hands and just more pop compared to something like a Ripple. Moving on, let's take a look at the 11624 Power Pegasus paddle. So this is probably my favorite paddle on this list, but in terms of the power, it's not up there compared to like the Scorpius and Ripple. It's a just a step lower compared to those. Though for the feel of the face, this is more stiffer, a bit more like has that bit of a hollow feel, but it does have some good dwell time to it. But yeah, I think it is, in my opinion and my experience, it's more durable compared to the Scorpius. So I think it's just with the way that the construction is on this. So that's another plus for this. And uh, I'm just used to the feel. I like the way that this mold is. This is actually one of my favorite wide body mold. It's got that taper at the top two corners, and that comes down because this flares out here and pushes the balance and like the hitting area up a little bit higher compared to the other wide bodies on this list. So I really like this mold, and I like the feel. And overall, I think this is a really great paddle. And I think people that want a power paddle in that power category, I think this is more beginner friendly compared to something like a Scorpius. So very good option to consider and probably my favorite paddle on this list right now. All right, next, let's talk about the Aiso Ryu. So this is the cheapest paddle on this list, and with a code, I believe it actually goes under $100. And this is more of an all-court style paddle. It's not a power paddle, but it does have a very big sweet spot. It's a really forgiving, really stable paddle. For me, this is probably the paddle that I would bring as a backup in my bag, mainly because of just how forgiving it is. And it still has like decent power to it, which is why it's in the all core category, compared to something like the Spartus Apollo, which was previously like filled that like spot for me. This is just a bit more powerful and poppy. I see this as like a juiced up version of the Spartus Apollo, which is why I enjoy this so much. But yeah, just a really good all court style paddle with a big sweet spot. Nothing special about this really, but for me, it's just like a paddle I can pick up and play really easily with. Next, let's talk about the Gearbox GX2 Hypers. So this, like the other GX2 series, it has that very, very plush feel. I think it's the most plush feel out of all the paddles on this list. But you get that disconnect because it surprisingly has more power and pop, and the ball comes off the face faster than you expect it to. Now, I think the thing about the Hyper compared to the Integra and the elongated option is the Hyper is probably the best feeling one, mainly because there's less of that disconnect. There's less power on the Hyper, so um, while it does have that plush feel and it still has that unexpected power, there's not as much of that power. So there's just overall less of a disconnect compared to the Integra and the elongated. So I think because of that, I like the feel on this the best, and it just has like it's easier to connect to in my opinion. So I think that's why this was probably the most popular out of the three. But still, I'm not a huge fan of that feel. I think it's just a bit strange. But if you did want something like this, if you did want a really plush paddle that did give you good power, the GX2 series is one that I would recommend. And yeah, this is a really good option if you want the wide body one. All right, next, let's talk about the Engage Pursuit Pro 1 wide body options. Um, it's basically like the Pursuit Pro version of the wide body. So of the Pursuit Pro, which was the EX, I believe. And yeah, it's what you would expect of it because the original Pursuit Pro 1 of the elongated option was basically the same thing with just less weight. So lower swing weights and lower twist weights, but it was a much more manageable swing weight for a lot more people, and it gave you more customization options. And now the Pursuit Pro 1 version of the wide body, it's the same thing. Like the original EX was a bit on the heavier end, and this just gives you that lighter swing weight. So you can add your own perimeter weighting to it. And yeah, that's basically all it is. So it still has that same feel, but just the Pursuit Pro 1 in that wide body shape. So nothing really to say about this one. Next, let's talk about the Carbon True Foam 2. So this is a really good, solid wide body foam paddle. It still has the characteristics of the True Foam that you see in the other shapes. So it can still shape the ball pretty well, and you get that sort of like foam feeling that helps you like just shape the ball, which is really nice. Personally, I just don't like that feel that much. I just feel like it squishes into the face a little too much for my liking. And I also don't like this shape. I guess I was just talking about it on the Pegasus, but not a big fan of this square shape because it kind of just makes the hitting surface more well-rounded. And I kind of prefer it higher at the top, which is why I like the, the taper of the Pegasus shape. That's mainly why I'm not a fan of this. I think if it was in a different mold, it was a bit stiffer, I would like this more, but um, that's just me personally. I know a lot of people would still like this paddle. You might like that squishier feel and be able to take more advantage of that ball shaping you can get with this. But yeah, personally for me, not a huge fan of it, but I still think it's a great paddle. All right, let's talk about the wide body for the Vatic Pro Saga series, and that's the Blooms. So this came in the 14 and 16 millimeters, but the 16 millimeters came out first. So I believe this series is the only Gen 1.5 paddles on this list. Yeah, I think it's the only Gen 1.5. But anyways, the Bloom 16 compared to the Flash and the V7 and the other shapes, this one's noticeably a lot softer. So there's a lot less power and pop on this, much more control oriented compared to the other Sagas. And I think it's just a really good beginner friendly paddle for people in that beginner to intermediate level that are looking for a really forgiving paddle with good sweet spots and just good control overall. I think this is a very good option to go for, especially because it does use that Gen 1.5 construction. So you're gonna have to worry less about core crushing than you are with the other Gen 2s and Gen 3s on this list. They also came out with a 14 millimeter, and I think that one is a lot more offensive than the 16 millimeter, especially once you add weight around it. For me, I just did the same setup weight on the four corners, and that one I would say is really similar to the Neonic Flare Prime X. It's just a bit stiffer and less substantial feeling, and also just not as powerful. But if you did like the Neonic Flare Prime X, wanted maybe stiffer feel, a little bit less power, then that's what you would go for. But Saga Bloom series, yeah. All right, that's all the paddles I wanted to talk about today. I know there are probably some I missed, and then there are probably some you might be asking about that probably just haven't hit yet. But yeah, I just wanted to do a wide body kind of comparison for the first half of the year, and I'll try to do a more comprehensive one at the end of the year. But anyways, that's it, guys. Let me know what you think about this video down in the comments below. And if you do want to support this channel, I've added links and my discount code in the video description below if you do want to pick any of these paddles up. All right, see you guys.